I'll show you end to end of the roadmap of gaining the strength and the knowledge and the system of knowing how to regulate your emotions the most best way possible. I've curated 3 to 4 different research papers, my own knowledge, read different books about it as well, and condense it together in this video. Emotion regulation is the activation of a specific goal to control or modify an unfolding emotional reaction. So ideally, emotions are not like one thing, it flows with time. So when time goes, it flows, it changes, it ebbs, it takes a new form. And that's why emotional regulation is very abstract. Well, the question is, why do we even need emotional regulation? So basically, as a human, when you have uncertainty, okay, you have this gap between reality, right, and your present self, okay, and that creates this internal questions, sometimes anxiety, and you tend to want to regulate yourself, right? That's the caveat. Well, the truth is, you need to regulate your emotions in order to regulate your life. But where does the emotional regulation even come from? So here's one extended process model that is found from this research paper. And you see that there's emotions, okay? Now, emotions are derived from this valuation system. What is this valuation system? This internal valuation system inside your heart or your brain has this idea of current versus goal, okay? You have an idea of what is the current situation and what's the goal situation, okay? So think of it like a level 2 sort of machine, and in level 1 you have what is called your present emotions. And what happens is that it's in level 1, this level 2 tries to manipulate level 1, and what happens is that when it manipulates level 1, you get to regulate your emotions. Now regulation comes from these 5 main factors, which is situational selection, situational modification, attentional deployment, cognitive change, and response moderation. You don't need to be too quirky about it, but you'll learn as time goes on. And the further caveat is that your state of emotion defines your decision making, and that's why emotion regulation is so important. Slowly, once you understand the underlying science, you will be far better off in regulating your emotions. So let's agree on a standard system of emotional regulation, and that is in the extended process model. We know that there's 3 stages of emotional regulation. First is identification, and second is selection of the strategy, what to do, the 5 things, right? Selection and implementation. Now, we're not really sure how to implement. However, you'll be fully sure by the end of this video. So this is the main fundamental process, and the biggest thing is emotions is literally a continuum process, and it flows, it ebbs, it abstracts. In control over yourself. So a research from California University by Matthew D and colleagues stated that your right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, so RLVPFC, you don't need to be too technical about that. If its activity is increased, it leads to a decreased activity in your amygdala. All right, why is that important? So you know that emotional regulation only is existent, or we need it when we feel less controlled, and that feeling is guided by, I would say, anxiety, stress, uncertainty, or in a more defined way, it can be said as this heightened activity in your, or restlessness. That happens, right? Remember the time when you were so much invested into something, and then you feel like, oh my god, I'm losing myself. You're maybe so much emotional as well. What happens is you don't feel like baseline. So maybe this is you most times, okay? You're probably at here, and that happens. And that's related with your amygdala, which is the quote-unquote alarm part of the brain. Alarm part of brain that stays active. That tells you that, hey, something's wrong, but you want to feel like something is not wrong. Whenever you face a stressful situation, maybe a hard exam, you feel like something is wrong, your brain goes to fixing mood. But eventually that fixing mood fails, and that's why you really want to regulate emotions, right? The problem is it cannot happen directly. But here's what the thing is. So as we know that the right ventral lateral prefrontal cortex, if we increase the activity of that certain brain region, it lowers the activity of amygdala and you feel calmer. And when you feel calmer, you feel more regulated. And when you feel more regulated, you can make more decisions better and feel better about yourself as well. So that happens, and that has been proven by the studies, that when you name the emotion, you literally name it by saying it or writing in a piece of paper. You name the emotion that you're feeling. Instead of saying, I am anxious, say, I feel anxious. What happens is phenomenal. I'll explain through a very brief psychological thing here. So basically, when you are feeling that you need to be regulated, you have an inner child, okay? Inner child that craves for attention. That, hey, I'm facing this. Please, someone acknowledge me. The thing is, that doesn't happen because you don't even know that your inner child is craving for that, right? You just want a solution, but no one makes you feel seen. Here's the caveat. When you name the emotion, your inner child gets seen, feels seen. Oh, by the way, feeling drives the world, okay? And that creates this effect of lowering the activity in your amygdala and furthering, like literally going, like your stress hormones or your thinking or your worry go like this. It only happens because you make yourself feel seen. And the furthest thing about emotional regulation is that think of all the strategies. Think of all the strategies. Like think in a way where what are the other ways that I can make me feel seen? And that is your exact and absolute roadmap to emotional regulation, because emotional regulation comes from making your emotions seen, making yourself habituated with how you can make yourself seen, and then applying the strategy further on to just go on with life. Once you feel seen, you feel the problem. You feel the problem already starts going away. You feel now there's no problem. And that's the exact roadmap. The identification, then selection, then implementation. And now, how do we implement it? By naming the emotion, how you feel. Because making yourself heard is the absolute best thing that you can do to further rejuvenate every single thing. So here's one thing that I fundamentally believe in, okay? So that's you, that's your logic, that's your emotion, okay? They all need to be in an agreement in order for you to become stronger, have more willpower and regulate your emotions, because this guy has the greatest priority, because this guy literally influences the logic. You might be asking how. Well, trust me, it does. I can tell you in many different ways. Read the book Everything is F and you will see what I mean. Is that your emotions are the ones that are leading you into life, and you need to master that. Now let's learn about decision making with emotional regulation. That's more practical about life, right? So we have a model here from a research paper done in Stanford, James and colleagues. When you have emotional cues, okay, certain things that you face in life, such as anxiety, such as stressful situations or scenario based things, that that things are evaluated in your brain. Your brain thinks, oh, is it good, is it bad, and everything. Now you have these tendencies, okay? You have these emotional response tendencies, behavioral, experiential, crying, sad, happy, tantrum throwing, oh my god, I don't feel like in control to myself, or I just feel sad, maybe I will not react, but I will feel internally. That's you. That's you. And that's us. And that's human. 100%. Because emotions make human. If we try to eliminate emotions and emotional regulation goes up, then the point of this video is absolutely nothing, right? You need to be soft as well as logical with your emotional self, because that defines how you rejuvenate. And that modulation leads to emotional responses. So you have cues and your brain assess, is this cues bad or good? Now they respond, which is you respond based on that. Now our goal is to change the way we evaluate, change this way. And that's the way that we will be able to regulate our emotions better and make the world better. Now, here's two main complicated factors about emotional regulation. So, the first emotion related thing first concerns reality-based anxiety, which arises when situational demands overwhelm the ego. When there's greater situation, but your ego, okay, cannot handle all of that situation. That's one sort of anxiety. And then there's second type of anxiety regulation, concerns with identity and super ego based anxiety, which arises when strong impulses press for expression. So when there's different like things in the world which like pressurizes you to express yourself, it may be sadness, happiness, or something. That's two different types of anxiety because it has a conflict between the present world and your ego. Your ego is shaped by things that you've seen previously, how you believe yourself, how you want to be seen yourself. These have a discrepancy, okay? And when there's a discrepancy, it creates a tension, and that tension is rejuvenated as anxiety. And whenever that tension creates outputs that you don't want or you want to regulate, that means you need emotional regulation, because sometimes being sad feels and sometimes being sad doesn't feel. And the moment it doesn't feel okay, that means you know that deep down you're trying to regulate that specific emotion, but you're not being able to. However, that's the exact thing that you need to know, that okay, maybe I'm reacting or not being able to regulate my emotions, but sometimes I don't need to regulate my emotions because I should let my body or my brain or my heart give out those emotions, but to a certain point. So as I said, a situation provides a stimulus, and that stimulus evaluates in your brain, okay, and then you react, and then you feel that you may should or should not have reacted, and that's the process. But now, as you know this, next time when you feel like heightened or emotionally regulated, just apply the extended process model, EPM, EPM, identification, the extended process model, identification, selection, application, okay? And how do you apply? By naming the emotion. Application, what do you apply? What? Those 5 things that I have listed, which includes, and it's not limited to, situational selection, select which situation, situational modification, you see it differently, attentional deployment, move your attention somewhere else, cognitive change, and response moderation. Now let's connect it to productivity, to a better life, and how it really can make you so much further in life, and how you can do it yourself and setting yourself free, right? So affect regulation, right? You're being affected by something, you want to regulate it. Same as emotional regulation, it comes with coping, emotional regulation, mood regulation, defenses, okay? These are the things that we have kind of covered, right? The great thing is emotional regulation, in that research paper by James and colleagues, we know that emotional regulation is actually linked with personality, clinical, health, biological, cognitive, development, social, and that all defines your quality of life and productivity. Productivity is not about being able to work hard or work smart or something like that. That's not productivity. Productivity is a life, is a lifestyle, is a system, is a process, is a mental process, is a mental thinking in your brain where you get the freedom to enjoy life while doing what you love, and enjoying every single moment in the process, and defining your character to the best possible way. So that happens when you are able to regulate your emotions, right? So when you harness the brain's psychology, you harness your brain, okay? And when you harness your brain, you can guide it, you can shape it, and that shapes your reality. And being able to shape your reality to the way where it makes you happy will further enhance your emotional regulation, your productivity, and your life. And that, my friend, is the roadmap to emotional regulation. Remember, just identify a situation, select what strategy to give. Do I change the thing? Do I think differently? Okay, now how do I do it? By labeling the emotion. Now, also, while understanding the underlying factors, how your brain processes the internal need, how you want to be feel seen, right? And making yourself feel seen will solve 80% of the problems, because you'll now know what to work on. See you guys in the next video. Bye bye.